I'm building quick and easy bench work that you can use for your model railroad layout on Ron's Trains and Things right now. Hi, I'm Ron of Ron's Trains and Things, and today I'm working on a small staging yard to serve transfer traffic on my layout, so I need to build some bench work for that yard. Now, the area that I'm working with today is small. It's only 8 feet wide and 10 inches deep. So I'm going to be using a shelf-type benchwork construction. Now, this is a perfect type of construction if you want to build something like a small switching layout, or maybe just add a little extension to your existing layout. So if that's you, you may find some tips today that'll be very helpful as you build your bench work. If you'd like to see more model railroad tips, tools, and techniques, be sure to subscribe down below and click that little bell icon so you can catch future videos. But in the meantime, let's head on over to the expansion to my layout and I'll show you the staging yard and how I'm building the bench work for it. This video is brought to you by Midwest Model Railroad. Now with 15,000 square feet and one-day shipping, they truly are your one-stop model railroad shop. MidwestModelRR.com. Link in the description. So I am sitting at the lower deck of my layout as far west or as close to the center of the layout as you can go on the lower deck. Right behind the camera is where the lower level goes into the helix to climb up to the upper deck. And the area that I'm working with today is right here. On the prototype, trains that are coming from the west on the Wichita Falls subdivision, as they reach the northwest corner of Saginaw, can go one of two directions. They can travel the main line on down into North Yard, and from there go on south. Or they can take a Y that will put them northbound on the Fort Worth subdivision and take them in just a few miles to Alliance, Texas. Now, Alliance, Texas is an area that was built by Ross Perot back in the 90s. It was built as a free trade zone before NAFTA, and it includes a number of different kinds of cargo transportation, including a large cargo airport and a very large intermodal facility. And this track leads directly to that Alliance intermodal facility. Now, on my layout, I am not actually modeling the intermodal facility at all, but I wanted to model the traffic that comes from the west that goes to Alliance. So that traffic that comes across the upper deck as it comes out of the helix here will take this version of that Y into the staging area that I'm building today that will represent Alliance specifically to stage those intermodal trains. So I've got the turnout in place, and you can see I've got the opening in the wall where it's going to go through. Today, we're going to be going to the other side of this wall and installing the bench work for that little staging yard. And here we are on the other side of that wall. I believe you can see just in the edge of your camera shot, the little spot of light, the hole where the track comes through the wall, right behind where I showed you just a moment ago. And I think you can also see the edge of the helix here. This is coming out right along the bottom edge of the helix. And you can see the wall behind me. You can see that red line, which is exactly where our bench work is going to go and where our little staging yard is going to be. This staging yard is going to include 3 storage tracks and also a couple of tracks for running around trains so I don't have to handle too much. So the total width or depth of this staging yard is only going to be about 10 inches. And I'm building a shelf type bench work today using shelf brackets. These are 8-inch shelf brackets, and I'm going to be actually extending them, putting a 10-foot bench work on these. This area where I am is actually kind of a studio area. It's a little corner of what was a family room at one time. There's a fireplace behind me, or behind the camera, and I do some filming here. It's a good place for this, but I want it to look nice. So these shelf brackets are going to show, so I got the finished screws for them, and we're going to be doing this in such a way as to hopefully make it look nice in this area as well as be functional. I'm going to be building the bench top here with 1/2-inch plywood, and I've got some nice sanded plywood that I had left over. I actually bought it with this in mind whenever I built the rest of the bench work. And so we're going to be installing that today. Now I'm going to be using a couple of tools that I want to show to you that are really fantastic for building bench work. One of them you see right here beside me, which is my laser level. This is a fire core laser level. I actually did a review on this laser level several years ago, which you can find. I'll link it in the description down below. They have upgraded this laser level, but it's still available from Firecore on Amazon. I'm going to link that in the Amazon pick of the week in the description down below if you'd like to check it out. And also, you've seen before my digital level, which I'm going to be using for finding plumb to mark where my brackets are going to go to make sure that I get them straight up and down on the studs. You've seen this before, but I'll link it in the pick of the week down below as well. If you'd like to check it out, just learn a little more about it, like to pick one up, it's a great place to do that. But with all that said, it's time to get started building and installing this bench work. So let's go. I have built shelf-type bench work using much larger shelf brackets on the entire upper deck of my layout, so I figured out some ways to make this work quite well. I like to have a wood cleat on top of the shelf bracket to screw my sub roadbed to. In this case, I had some long strips of 1/2-inch plywood left over from another project, so I cut them to length to use for this purpose. You can also use 1x4 or other 1x lumber. You will note that I'm using another block of wood to help me line them up correctly with the back of the bracket. These cleats are 10 inches long, the same as the width of my bench work. I am attaching them to the brackets using 1/2-inch cabinet door screws. There's nothing special about these screws except that I once had an entire coffee can full of them, so I've used them for various applications that needed short screws for many years. I attached these cleats to all of the shelf brackets. Next, I used my digital level to mark the placement of the brackets. I've already located and marked the location of each stud, but the way the screw hole configuration is on these brackets, I really need each bracket to be perfectly centered and plumb on the stud. I placed a piece of painter's tape on the level so I would know exactly the height to make each mark. With the positions marked, I started installing the brackets. This is much easier to do with an assistant, but as I was working alone this day, I had to carefully align each bracket and drive the bottom screw first, then align the top and install the upper 2 screws. The laser level was an absolute godsend for this process, as I certainly did not have enough hands to hold a level as well. I used my digital level to check each bracket for level as it was coming out from the wall. The only adjustment here is a good old-fashioned bending of the bracket, and most of the brackets did need a slight adjustment as these brackets are designed intentionally to angle slightly down towards the back so items will not roll off of your shelves. I ripped my strip of plywood to 10 inches wide, a full 8 feet long, with a skill saw in my garage, and then I installed it on the top of these brackets. I attached it temporarily with a couple of screws, then used a countersink at each screw point, and then drove the screws in those locations. I used 1-inch drywall screws for this application. I then used some Elmer's wood filler to fill the holes over the tops of the screws. This product is easy to work with and sands very nicely. As I said, this bit of bench work is in a small studio area, and I want it to blend in with the walls and the decor of the area, so rather than using a fascia, I am trimming out the front edge with a joint of 1-inch outside corner trim. I cut the trim to length, applied wood glue to the gluing surface on the top and front edge of the plywood bench top, then clamped the corner trim in place solidly and let the glue dry overnight. A ketchup bottle from the dollar store works great for holding and applying wood glue. The most important consideration in this process is not to over-apply the glue and to be sure to spread it out over the gluing surface. At this point, I drew track lines on the benchtop to make sure I knew exactly how everything was going to fit. I sanded the now dry wood filler and vacuumed up all of the dust. Now, I know that this is a little different, but as this yard is in my studio space, I decided to paint it white, at least for now. I used some white paint that I had left over from painting the walls of this area. I applied just one coat to the bulk of the benchwork. I could still see the pencil lines through this coat of paint, so I can still use them as a guide as I lay track, but they will disappear when I apply white caulk as adhesive and install the track. The trim piece on the front of the shelf will get another coat or two, as it is the most visible part of the benchwork. And with that, this quick and easy benchwork is complete and ready for track. So that's how I build fast and simple shelf-type benchwork. And like I said earlier, you can buy these shelf brackets in a variety of sizes for smaller or larger areas. And I've used this exact same process for the entire upper deck of my layout. Some of it is as wide as 20 inches, and the shelf brackets have worked fantastic, leaving absolutely no obstruction to access to nor viewing of the lower deck of my layout. Well, be sure to check out those tools that I mentioned in the Amazon Pick of the Week in the description down below, as well as many other valuable links that you will find there. And if you'd like to see more about how I build various types of benchwork or other model railroad content, check out the links on your screen. And be sure and join me on Tuesdays as I bring you even more great model railroad videos, and I look forward to seeing you then. 10, Lizzie?